A talk show that cuts to the truth, no matter how painful it might be, and no BS. Citizen Smith, Citizen Smith, Citizen Smith.
Here's a man who would not take it anymore. A man who stood up against the scum, the dogs, the filth. Here is someone who stood up.
It's time for Citizen Smith.
Good morning. How are you today? Friday. It's Good Friday. Aloha Friday. Well, I'm a little disappointed. I have to tell you that I was planning on being live in Klamath Falls at the Tribal Council's administrative building and looking at the hatchery of the suckerfish and doing the show live from there. But I was derailed by smoke as I drove south and passed into Salem. And just beyond that a little bit, the skies were thick with a yellowish red and orange smoke that it covered the horizon. You couldn't see the hills and the mountains. The air quality was terrible. I was shocked. I had no idea. And then I was like, bootleg fire, right? The bootleg fire is only 28 miles northeast of Klamath Falls. And it's covering an area of over 640 square miles right now. And the air quality in that whole region is now beyond hazard. It's in the purple zone. It's like goes to red and then it's like a purple. It's really bad. And I wanted to spend some time hiking and seeing the lake, and I was going to try to work my way north to Crater Lake, and I just didn't want to breathe that air. You know, there's a better time to go, and it ain't now. So you, as they say in the weather center, be flexible with your schedule as you deal with these wildfires, because there's 30 wildfires burning in Washington State and Oregon right now. I mean, the Northwest is on fire, and it's getting worse. The dry weather is not stopping. It's hot. They're talking about heat lightning over the weekend, setting off more fires. So with that said, we are doing a special time at 10 a.m. today for the Citizen Smith show so that we can talk to the Klamath tribal members via Zoom, as we've been doing most of this pandemic. And I will do so now with the tribal council, starting off with the fisheries biologist for the tribe, Alex Gonyaw, who joined me a couple of months ago to talk about the issue of the suckerfish, the quality of the Upper Klamath Lake water, as well as the drought effects on the area, and what has become a battle for water between agricultural interests and the tribal interests in preserving their water source from the Upper Klamath Lake, and the fish itself, the suckerfish, which has a long history of the tribe as a subsistence fish. So did Chinook salmon, as I looked through many of the information you gave me, Alex. Welcome to the show, first of all.
Thank you, Ken.
Nice to see you this time, talking as we last time only had audio. We will be making room for some other tribal council members to talk, but right now it's just you, Alex Gonyaw of the Klamath Tribes, leading the conversation today as we talk about the suckerfish, which earlier in the summer, as the summer was just beginning, you were saying to me, you're worried this could be an extinction year or a very serious drop-off that will not be able to be rebuilt as a fish species. We're a couple of months into it now. Let's just jump right into it. Where do you think things are at? Has it gotten worse with the drought? I assume the challenges are great.
Yeah, drought is never particularly easy for both people or animals, although animals tend to be a bit more resilient than people, given how long they've been on the planet. The primary issue we have this year is we have a drought condition layered on top of a very, very warm summer and relatively little cold, clean water coming into Upper Klamath Lake, which really just allows the lake to stagnate in the summer sun. And when that happens, we have this massive algae bloom. It's not actually, we call it an algae, but it's actually a cyanobacteria. And this massive algae bloom is in the process of crashing. So as the day length gets shorter and the nights tend to get a little bit cooler, this algae bloom crashes, and that crashing process pulls all of the oxygen out of Upper Klamath Lake. And if all the stars align in a negative way, that we often get fish kills. And we have found a few dead individuals, about 20 or so total. And we're not expecting anything to really get better until October. It's typically when water quality will improve.
You sent me some interesting photos. We have one of the suckerfish. We can show the audience. The suckerfish it's an ugly fish, bottom feeder, but essential to the ecosystem. Interesting. I was talking to a bartender, and I mentioned this issue about the suckerfish, and he told me, "Oh yeah, we used them in our aquarium. I had them as a kid." I was like, "You had a suckerfish in your aquarium?" And he's like, "Yeah." He's an Oregonian, so I guess they have been out of the wild as well for breeding for aquariums. Is that correct?
Those would be things like Chinese algae eaters, not necessarily what we call catastomids or members of the sucker family in North
Hmm.
America.
Okay, so
You
there's
know,
more
what I
suckerfish
like,
around the world.
yes, yeah. What I like to tell people, is there's really no such thing as an ugly animal. Everything has their job, everything has their role in nature. And with respect to the Chwam and Koptu, or Lost River and Short-nosed suckers, their job is to clean the environment. They clean the bottom of Upper Klamath Lake and clean the tributaries and help to maintain water quality in Upper Klamath Lake.
Yeah.
And with the decline of these species, we've seen a sort of a lockstep decline in the water quality of the lake. So as we've taken sort of cogs out of the clockwork, we've gradually watched this system collapse.
Mhm. And I don't mean they're ugly. I mean, look at
Oh,
there's beautiful fish and there's fish that aren't exactly, the picturesque fish that we're used to. Here's a scientific photo I just kind of used on my iPad. So are there two species? Or I see two different suckerfish here
yeah,
from
there
Upper Lake.
there are two species. We have 16 native fish species here in the Upper Klamath Basin, 12 of which are endemic, meaning they're only found in a small geographic area. So it's a center for unique biodiversity. Two of these, the Chwam and Koptu, were put on the endangered species list in 1988. And since about 1993, we've had a steady chipping away at the population of both of these fish, largely due to um, poorly managed agricultural operations, both above Upper Klamath Lake and below Upper Klamath Lake, where water is used.
Hmm. So let's talk a little bit about the condition of the lake right now. The drought obviously has had an effect on it. How low is the lake as we speak?
The lake is about 4139 and change. That's roughly 2.5 feet or so higher than its absolute minimum. So it's approaching its lowest point. And if we happen to get a week or so of no wind and a really shallow lake with blazing sunshine, that's typically when we see large fish kills is after those conditions.
And again, what's the population of the species of fish that you're concerned about with the suckerfish?
Yeah, so all told, um, for the Koptu or short-nosed sucker, there's probably in the range of 3,400 fish left that are genetically intact, and they were all born in the early 90s, so they're very old and they're very tired.
Mhm.
So they're about 3,400 Koptu. For the Chwam, there's about 5,000 that spawn at some springs on the east side of Upper Klamath Lake, and roughly 19,000 that spawn in the river. So all told, maybe 24,000 fish total. And again, all very old. They're really almost no juveniles in the system. The fish have tried to spawn every year. They come up the rivers to spawn, produce many, many millions of larval fish. And then by the fall, because of the human-made anthropogenic water quality issues the lake has, it kills all the babies.
What are we looking at for maybe a return in the next year or so of juveniles will survive?
Um, it might be past the point where there's a reasonable chance of expecting that. Given that these fish, I tell people these fish are in their 60s, if you put it in human terms. So they're getting up there. They're getting tired, and I think the probability of them naturally repopulating the lake just by pure chance is relatively slim.
You do have fish breeding ponds, and this wonderful PDF you gave me of information shows. I see 3 ponds here. I can put it on the iPad. I don't know if you have it, Justin, but those ponds that are in that PDF that you sent me, are they active right now with fish breeding?
Yeah,
And are you trying to get juveniles to be released from these ponds?
yeah. The overall concept is that older fish tend to be a little bit tougher. They've been through a few years of the gauntlet, so to speak. And so our goal is to raise either wild caught larvae or larvae produced from eggs in these ponds up to a size where they will be tough enough to handle the human caused conditions in Upper Klamath Lake. And we have many tens of thousands. It's difficult to know exactly how many until you drain the ponds and collect them, but many tens of thousands.
Many
Fish.
tens of thousands of fish.
Yeah, unfortunately, probably a better way to look at this, as opposed to seeing it as a solution, is genetic salvage of sorts. The vast majority of the genetic diversity of these species has been eliminated from the planet already. And so we're capturing that genetic diversity and keeping it safe in the event that these populations sort of blink out of existence or fade away. And I think I sent you some PDFs, PDF of the population trends. You might show that. It's fairly grim.
Yeah, I saw those numbers. It was like starting at 4,000 or something, and then they go.
Yeah, it's been a steady decline since 2009. In particular, with the fish that spawn in the Williamson River, it's been a catastrophic decline. When I first started with the Klamath Tribes 5 years ago, there were approximately 108,000 chwam that spawned in the Williamson River, and now there's around 19,000 after 5 years. So it's I don't see a whole lot of reason for hope unless there is a massive effort to improve the water quality of Upper Klamath Lake.
There's a long history too of this fish with the Klamath Tribe. We have a photo of 1905 photo of the tribe using the fish, the sucker fish, to dry it out and as a food source. So, from a food source standpoint, in the history, it was an important fish for subsistence, as well as Chinook salmon, which had a good population there before the dams were built.
Yeah, it's a sort of a sad testament to the settlement process that the Upper Klamath Basin encountered when Western civilization came in. There were about 8 fish here, large-bodied fish that would have been used as food sources, and 3 of them are now on the endangered species list: the chwam, cockatoo, and bull trout. And the Chinook, coho, lamprey, and steelhead have been completely removed from the system, extirpated, we call it, from a local area by dam building activities. So the only fish, after being here for 14,000 plus years, the only fish that the Klamath Tribes has left that they can practice their cultural traditions with is the red band trout.
There used to be millions of salmon coming to the Upper Klamath Lake?
I would expect population estimates are a little difficult, but if you look at the amount of habitat that they would have had access to, I think millions would have been reasonable.
Wow. I don't know how much people realize the damage dams have done. Sure, they provide electricity, but they've wiped out massive wild salmon runs across the country. Now there's a movement to get rid of dams, but I don't know how much of a movement that would be, and if you could restore some of these salmon species to their natural habitat, or are they lost and gone for good?
No, I don't think they're lost and gone for good. We know a tremendous amount about salmon and reintroducing salmon to areas. They will be challenged by the water quality in Upper Klamath Lake during their migrations. However, up above Upper Klamath Lake, there is a large amount of habitat that would be suitable for them. The dams on the lower Klamath River are, like what I like to say is that they're socially obsolete in the sense that the electricity that they generate and the benefits, if there are any at this point, are very minor compared to the damage that they're doing, both to the lower river tribes in terms of water quality and their salmon, and providing simply a physical barrier for the salmon to get back here so the Klamath tribes can exercise their treaty rights, which is the highest law of the land. And frankly, we haven't done a very good job at holding up that treaty.
What would you say is what is that?
It's the EAS.
Oh, we got an alert system going on here. For what?
I'm not quite sure what the alert is, but it's going off.
Okay, so the dams. How much of the dams? What dams in particular do you see that could be removed? And
So
does the tribe have a right to enforce that removal at this point in the game?
the tribes doesn't necessarily have a legal right to have them removed. We would absolutely love to see them removed. And I should preface that by saying I am not a tribal member. I'm not speaking for the tribe as a whole. When I say we, I'm talking about the community in general and the tribal community in general. We would love to see the lower river dams removed. The Klamath River Renewal Corporation has plans in place. They've gotten most of the various approvals to get them removed, and they should, in theory, start coming out in 2022.
If it's successful, that's a big if, I guess. Well, first of all, what are the obstacles of removing them?
You have to get FERC licensing approval to have the license transferred over to the Klamath River Renewal Corporation. You have to get various water quality certifications for the process. And there's a lot of stakeholders that you have to work through and make sure that everybody is made somewhat whole for the process. But as it stands now, there really aren't any major roadblocks in place. And we're looking forward to seeing the first excavator show up and get rid of these things that not even the owner of the dam wanted them, Pacific Core. So if it's not a business asset that's worth keeping, why would we keep it?
So you're thinking, all right, prognosticate. When could you see some dams removed, and what would that do to the restoration of fish species and running water, rivers?
Yeah, so whenever you put a dam in a river, you create a giant slow pool. And where we are, we get very intense sunshine. And that essentially turns the river into a series of algae-filled toxic water bodies that have a particular type of neurotoxin-producing algae. By removing those dams, that artificial water body would go away. The river would get less solar radiation, should be cooler, and there'll be less algae generated that decrease the water quality for the lower river salmon.
So there's been a lot of coverage of the rights for water for agricultural lands around the area.
Mhm.
Farmers versus fishery. Which one wins out in this? How things going right now? How bad is the drought? You mentioned last time water was being taken from aquifers and down near the wells because there was farmers are so desperate to get water. What's going on right now?
Yeah, we're starting to see people's wells go dry. Um,
People's being who?
uh, Residences who have shallow wells. The irrigation wells are probably mostly still watered. Um, it's a sad thing that we have to say it's tribes against agriculture, because it really doesn't have to be. Um, the tribes value their fish. They value their culture and their heritage, and they just want to see that preserved.
So
And
where are things? I mean, it was heating up 2 months ago. How heated is it right now?
uh,
For
it's about it's about as dry as it gets on the landscape here. Um, the project, we call it, the 200,000 acres south of Klamath Falls, isn't getting any irrigation water this year in order to meet the biological thresholds for the Chwam and Koptu in the lake. And this is really just to prevent a mass extinction event from occurring. It is not as if these fish are getting absolutely everything they need. It is simply to keep the patient alive on life support at this point. And I sent you a couple Word documents that outlines all the various lake elevation thresholds, and you'll see anywhere where there's an underline, an italics, or a bold is where since 2013 those elevation requirements have not been met. So unfortunately, what we hear from the community now is, well, we've been throwing all the water at the fish for 20 years, and it hasn't done any good. But if you look at the data, what the data shows, the data says that they haven't been getting even the bare minimum many times, especially in the spring when they need the water in order to spawn effectively and for the juvenile fish to have safe places to go in the lake.
Mm.
So it's a bit of a misinformation campaign to say that these fish have been uh, sort of catered to. These elevation thresholds are the absolute bare minimum required under the ESA to prevent jeopardy or the real risk of extinction. So, uh,
Are we
the,
also seeing farms drying up around the area? Have they run out of water, or what's their status? You probably
you see,
follow it.
yeah, you see a large number of dry fields. However, we are in the desert. It's natural to have drought conditions here, to go through drought cycles. Um, it genuinely makes me question the rationale and wisdom behind trying to farm such a large amount of acreage in the high desert and in an area where drought conditions happen pretty regularly through geologic time, but also in recent times. So it might be time to take the project that we have here, and which was developed in the early 1900s, before women had the legal right to vote and before Native Americans were considered citizens. Might be time to look at that and
Look at
redesign.
that, meaning look at utilizing agriculture in a high desert land where climate change is causing droughts to occur at even more severe cases.
Correct, and we've also layered on ESA requirements and the rights of Native American tribes. So it's probably time to look at a fairly major redesign. Now, the knee-jerk response to that is going to be, well, you're trying to destroy agriculture.
Well, and on a personal level, you'll have families of the farm saying you're trying to destroy me.
Sure, and that's a reasonable knee-jerk response. However, human beings have been farming for somewhere between 14,000 and 16,000 years, and we've adapted to every other social change and managed to feed the planet. So to say that change is impossible or not a good thing doesn't really reflect what's happened throughout human history. Is we've always adapted to change, and it's probably
this is a time, and climate change is accelerating. We're in our most severe situation with it right now since the Industrial Revolution.
Mhm.
And it is a time to adapt and change. And I think this is like a blueprint right here at Klamath Falls and that surrounding area of farmland, where what takes place there will be indicative of what can happen in other farming areas that are drying up and where drought is too severe to ignore anymore and adaptability has to take place. You're kind of
Yeah,
at ground zero.
yeah, it is. It is ground zero, and the impact from the changes really shouldn't be levied on um, the people who didn't cause the change, right? If
Or the
if
species.
if,
You've got
if
the
Western
natural world.
the natural world shouldn't have to adapt to our damage. We're the ones who installed all the wells and pumped too much water and had overly grandiose ideas about agriculture here that the landscape simply cannot deal with. So it's really agriculture's job to change here, and it's the tribe's job to protect their resources and their culture.
Well, you're in southern Oregon, near the southern border there, where California begins. And California is another example of a state that took a land that wasn't supposed to really be agriculture, desert, dry, and tapped into major lakes like Lake Mead, I guess. And they're also experiencing this, and they're a major agricultural state. So how they adapt is another grand scale that needs to be reached. And
Yeah, we've spent the last 150 years really just using technology forcing in order to make this all happen. It seems to be coming back to bite us a little bit.
yeah, we talk a lot about climate change and getting electric cars and CO2 emissions, getting it down. And by the way, methane is a huge problem, and that comes out of farms and agriculture, beef, cattle. This is where methane is. So as we discuss addressing climate change, we have to address farms. We're adapting vehicles. We have to adapt our farmlands now, and that might
Yeah.
mean eliminating those that are no longer productive or feasible.
Or well, if farms are businesses, they're businesses just like any other business. Um, all businesses have to change and adapt, or they go out of business. So, and agriculture really is no different, especially industrial level agriculture. Uh, there's still a requirement to change to meet market conditions and social expectations, and to not place their negative externalities on really anybody else. Their externalities should be absorbed by them in terms of cost. So the fact that agriculture's negative externalities have been largely placed squarely on tribal entities simply isn't the right thing to do.
Yeah,
How much Yeah, go ahead,
I
Joseph.
was going to say, I think we have another member trying to dial in. Kathy Rich. Let's see if I can get her. Kathy, can you hear us? Okay, maybe they're not there. I apologize. I thought they were there.
Has there been much dialogue between the farmers and the tribe? Any meetings? How's that going for communication to try to work as a community to address the problems of the drought, the lake?
It's a fairly tense situation now. I don't think there's a tremendous amount of direct communication. which on some level is unfortunate. It should be better. We should be able to fix this problem. We're human beings. We are amazing at doing fixing problems, both in terms of working with each other and also technologically. I mean, we have a helicopter on Mars. You would think we would be able to farm without driving 3 species extinct, but that's literally what we're doing right now. We are trading agricultural produce, potato chips and French fries, for the existence of 3 species here, and we're doing it consciously.
Well, like I said, it's an ugly fish, and maybe that's the way people perceive it. What do you want to save that ugly little bottom-feeding fish for? We got food that we're putting on the tables of people in America. You know, there's probably a lack of appreciation for the suckerfish as a fish. It's not that glorious king salmon that you see. It's not that beautiful rainbow trout. It's a bottom-feeding fish that, other than you and I talking about it, you could go across America and nobody would know it exists.
True, absolutely. Like I said, human beings have their own aesthetic impressions, which really doesn't reflect a creature's value in nature. Our version of beauty and usefulness is skewed by civilization, right? These 2 fish and all the other ones are just as useful and have a role in the environment as a grizzly bear or a bald eagle or any of the other charismatic megafauna.
Yeah, and it's not a sports fish. You know, the sports fish get protection more.
Yeah,
You know,
well,
fly
it used to
fishermen
be.
go out and catch, the beautiful trout in the rivers, and those rivers are, well, we have to protect this beautiful trout. It attracts fishermen. The fly fishermen love it. So you don't have that going for you either with that fish.
Kind
So,
of prior to their listing, there was actually a large recreational snag fishery here that brought people from all over, all the way from Southern California, to see and catch these fish. Um, if we were to look at it from an ecotourism perspective, I think if there were tens of millions of these pouring up out of the river, people would come and see them. It's a pretty amazing event
yeah.
to watch them come up.
How do they taste?
Unfortunately, we're going on 3 generations now of tribal members that haven't been able to fish for them, which is particularly sad. I've been told they are a flaky white fish. When it's described to me, it sounds a lot like cod. So it takes a little bit.
I bet you it was a great fish for eating when we had the picture of them drying the fish. It was probably a very delicious, healthy fish with good oils, and it's in those wild rivers. It was clean. There was no toxins. It was a wonderful food source.
Yeah, in the springtime, the tribal members would have made it through at times a very cold, very long winter, and the fish would pour up out of the lake in the probably tens of millions.
Tens of millions. Wow.
March, April, and May, and would have restocked the larders, so to speak. It would have been definitely a blessing to see these fish arrive year after year after year for 14,000 plus years. And they were managed in the sense that they knew not to take too many, and they were able to do that without destroying them for 14,000 years, which is pretty amazing.
Tens of millions down to a few thousand.
Down to somewhere in the neighborhood of 25,000.
From tens of millions.
Most likely, given the amount of habitat that they have.
I just shake my head. Humanity, right? We're very smart. We human beings are very smart people. We know how to make technology, and we know how to do all these we can put spaceships on the moon and Mars, but we can't protect our own planet and our own species from going to extinction. And I just shake my head when I hear these stories. And
it's disturbing that we're capable of doing the same thing, that in terms of extinction events, the same things that a meteorite strike would do naturally, that we've done that to this planet.
We're on Mars trying to find any sign of life, And you here on this planet, we have a beautiful fish like the suckerfish that was in the millions, and we don't appreciate that.
Yeah.
There has to be appreciation and respect, and that's where it all starts. And that's where the dialogue can make inroads. Until you've got that, you can't make the changes that are needed. And ignorance is a great obstacle to overcome in these issues.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's where we're at right now. Is we're in a state of ignorance, rather than problem solving mode, which is really where we need to be.
Well, something's got to change. I hope you guys can work it out and figure it out down there.
Yeah, we'll the Klamath tribes will not let these fish leave the planet. I'm not particularly hopeful about the ones in the wild, but we are going to keep them around no matter what.
All righty, very good. Alex Gonyaw, fisheries biologist working on behalf of the Klamath tribes in the Upper Klamath Lake area of Oregon, joining me today to talk about the suckerfish on the verge of extinction. It was the second time we visited this. We'll talk again. I'll keep an eye on this situation. I like to follow these types of stories. The forgotten species that we don't think about in this country. There's a lot of them, from fish to a little mouse, in San Francisco Bay Area. They're out there. And appreciation, respect, and information needs to be shared about them. And this is the first inroad, and discourse like this is good for it. Thank you, Alex, for joining me today on Citizen Smith.
Thank you very much, Ken. I appreciate it.
I don't know. I don't want to depress everybody with that this episode, but
I just like looking at the fish. It's ugly. I like it.
it's beautiful. It's a beautiful
can't-
fish.
It looks, it looks like a grumpy old. I'm a grumpy old fish.
They're old too. They grow so old, and you hear about millions in the river, and then
I look at it. It's just like, I married the wrong woman. That's what I think of.
It's been a tough life in this river.
Hey, watch it, buddy.
You think this is easy?
Okay, enough of that.
all right, very good. That does it for today's Citizen Smith. By the way, the census data came out yesterday. On Monday's show, we'll analyze the every 10-year collection of data of America, demographics, and we're going to gain a congressional seat in Oregon. One congressional seat will be added because of the population growth here in certain cities, but the rural areas are losing population. So we'll be analyzing the census data on Monday, which I love this. I've been waiting for it to come out. So having a lot of people, and it's got some very revealing information. That on Monday's show. Have a great weekend. Stay cool.